Welcome to Eternal Family Adoptions, where members of the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints share stories and secrets of building forever families through faith-centered adoptions. I'm Donna Pope. Join us as we discuss how our faith can guide our adoption journey and create family connections. Welcome to Eternal Family Adoptions, and we're so excited to be here with Shawn Rapier. Am I saying your name right?
Close enough. We say Rapier, just simply Rapier, but I'll take any of it, I'm just so happy anyone calls me at all, so it's good.
Well, I can't believe that that's true because from what I understand, you are, let me read just a couple of things, you are a podcaster yourself.
I am.
A devoted husband, father, comedian. All right, well, this will be fun. And content creator whose life journey is deeply interwoven with faith, family, and adoption. You're a proud member of the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints, and you openly share your personal adoption story, offering hope and perspective to families looking at this path.
I do.
So you got 6 kids.
Yeah, we have 8 kids total. 6 are adopted and 2 are biological kids. And it's been a long journey, but they're all grown and gone now. So,
How old is your youngest?
So our youngest will be 22 in November, and he's a bio kid. And then our oldest is 34, I believe. And so, yeah, it's a range, but they've all moved out of the house now, so...
So you've got the 8, and the youngest is a bio kid. Where's the other bio kid in the bunch?
The other bio kid falls in the middle. So yeah, so it's good. It's a pretty wild story of how it all came together. I mean, I don't know.
Well, that's what we're here to hear. So just launch right in and tell us the story.
Well, I'll jump in and you can scoot me along faster or tell me to back it up. I'll just kind of go with it. So a little bit of quick kind of background history. My wife and I are both from the California Bay Area, and I served a mission in Chile and she served a mission in Brazil. And then we never met before our missions. We got home and I ended up in Southern California, as did she. And we met, and we are one of those just horrible couples who within weeks of meeting each other were talking about marriage. We were married in the Oakland Temple less than 4 months after our first date. And we always tell people, don't do that, but it worked for us. We just celebrated, actually in 2 weeks, we'll celebrate our 31st anniversary. So we got married down there. I was kind of not sure what I was going to do. My wife was finishing up school. She was getting her bachelor's as an occupational therapist. And so she had an internship in Utah, and because her parents lived in the Provo area. And I was kind of starting to get into stand-up comedy and doing some other artistic, creative things. So I thought, I can live anywhere. Love this woman. And so we moved to Provo. She finished her internship, and the Provo School District offered her a job. At which point, I started getting into more acting along with stand-up, and it kind of started to take off, which was nice. Doing a lot of commercials, TV shows, and then really doing a lot of stand-up comedy, and it was great. So we were married for a couple of years, had just bought our first house, and my wife came home one day, and she said, hey, there are these 2 kids, and they are adorable. They're 1 and 2. And the 2-year-old has a lot of emotional and behavioral problems, and they're struggling to find a home for him. But for the little girl, everybody kind of wants them, and I'm afraid they're going to split them up. And she was their therapist, and she said, I feel like we should probably adopt them. Now, I immediately said, no, this is not me. We'd never discussed adoption, nothing. And I just didn't want to do it. So I did I grew up with John Hughes films like 16 Candles and movies like that, where the dramatic walk in the rain, with the dramatic music, and I had to pray and wrestle with the Lord. And I really did go for a walk in the rain one night.
And you did
I knew
that.
They were our kids. And it was really interesting. It was not on my radar at all, but God really said, these are your children. And so,
Okay, I'm going to stop you on that. I'm going to stop you on that because people will often say things to me like, God placed it on my heart that these children are mine. Other people will say, these, just like you said, these are our kids. Now, sometimes I'll hear people say that these are our kids, and I think, no, they're not. No, they're not. You just want them to be. So how did you know these were your kids?
Yeah, that was the question I asked. And I think I got an answer to the question. And it's interesting as we go forward in the story, because that's not the same answer I got for all of our children. These ones, I asked the question. I just wanted to know, are these our kids? Because I believe in the pre-existence and I believe in families being forever. I believe in a plan. So I believed at that moment, and not having any children, I only wanted our children. I did not want it to be, hey, we could be parents to these children. I needed to know, are these our kids or not? And so I asked that question, and the Spirit really confirmed to me, these are your children. And that was the message I got. Again, dramatically walking in the rain. That was unnecessary. I could have knelt by my warm bed. But anyway, yeah, that was really the answer I got, was these were our children. And so we went and, we started working with the state. We got our license. And it was really interesting. The foster mom at the time, she loved these kids and she wanted to adopt them both, but she had 3 kids under the age of 5. And in the state of Utah, you could not have 3 under 5 and foster 2. And they wanted to find, they used to call it foster adopt a long time ago. I don't know. Now it's open or something. But anyway,
No, it's still foster adopt.
Is it still foster adopt? Yeah. So all the cool kids called it foster adopt. So we were a foster adopt family and everything was good. And then the foster mom, who's a lovely lady, she came and met us. And we were this young couple. We were broke, and we had our first home. We paid $78,000 for this house. It was built in 1938. But this is going back to 1998, 99. So anyway, she took one look at everything and she said, these guys are too young and too poor. Actually, this would have been earlier. Sorry, this would have been this would have been early 98. So anyway, she said, they're too young and too poor. I'm not giving the kids to them.
How old were you?
Well, let's see. In 98, I would have been 26. And my wife would have been 28. But, we were in a starter home. And she just said, they're not right. Well, she found neighbors down the street who had already adopted 2 kids who had told her that they wanted to adopt more kids. So she convinced them or asked them. There's nothing nefarious. She just got them to agree to adopt these 2 kids. And she went back to the state and said, here's this family that's very wealthy, has a big, beautiful home, has already adopted 2 kids, wants more. If you don't give the kids to them, if you give them to the Rapiers instead, we will have to consider legal action. And the state said, okay. And we got a phone call out of the blue. Hey, you're not getting these kids. And it was a real trial of faith for us. I was rocked a little bit, because again, the question was not I think if I had prayed, should we try to adopt them? Could we be good parents to them? Would this work? All those things. And then it doesn't work out. That's fine. But the question was, are these our children? And the answer was, yes, they are. So we went through several weeks of a lot of pain, including a Christmas that we thought we were going to have kids at home. And it was quite difficult. It was a painful time. And then all of a sudden, one day my wife called and said, hey, that was another thing. I ended up getting a job because stand-up comedy wasn't going to sustain us. And my wife was saying that, she didn't want to work forever. She wanted to be home if we were going to have kids. And so I got into consumer electronics, where I've been for 28 years now. But anyway, she called and said, hey, the new family cannot keep these kids.
Why? Why couldn't they?
And that's what I asked. And she said, I don't really know the details. I said, I want to sit down with them because I'm not going through this again. And she said, well, the state has already done a panel on us. We're chosen. It's 100% us if we want. We went over that night to this sweet family's house, and we walked in, and she sat down, the mother, and she just started crying. And she said, I know my children are mine, my 2 adopted kids. And she said, and every night I kneel down and I pray with them. And she said, every night I have knelt down and I have prayed with David and Christa, who are the 1 and 2-year-old. She said, every night I've knelt down and prayed with them. And every night we say amen. And every night the Spirit says, these are not your children. And she said, I tried to ignore it. I tried to pray it away. I tried everything because we want more kids and we love these kids. And she said, but it won't go away. They're not supposed to be with us. And we know that. And she just sobbed. And they brought down David and Christa and put them in our laps. And we held them. And the Spirit was so overwhelming as the 4 of us just sobbed together that the Lord had this plan and things for us to learn from it. And it was actually a beautiful experience. So they were in so much pain. The next morning we called the state and said, hey, we'll do this. Of course, we will. And they said, okay, but you need to pick them up tomorrow morning. And we had not actually prepared the house for them. So my memory of that day was going to Toys R Us and Kids R Us and Babies R Us and just throwing cash in the aisles, and we'll take a crib, and we'll take a high chair, and we'll take a car seats for everyone. You know, it was just this big everything 2 kids would want. And we stayed up all night. Our neighbors came over. We stayed up till 3 a.m, turning one of the 2 bedrooms into a kid's room. And then the next morning at 8 a.m., we picked up David and Christa. And I still remember we had a little Volkswagen Jetta, and they were in the back in these car seats, and we drove away. And we were just blitzed, tired. And I remember looking in the rearview mirror going, what did we just do? What is happening? And then we got them home and we kind of put them down on the floor and we sat on the couch. And I looked at my wife. I was like, we're acting like we got puppies or something. What do we do? Like, how do we do this? They're 1 and 2. We love them, but we weren't sure what to do. And then that was how David and Christa came to us. Now the epilogue to that. And Donna, I don't want to just keep telling you. Cut me off anytime if you got questions. But
I am going to pause before you go to the epilogue and ask this question. I don't know the answer to it. I've had experiences with my kids where I knew, and people say, you knew? Yeah, I knew that they were my kids. But I work with a lot of people who say they know, but they're not. And I know they're not because they're not. And it's not my position to get revelation for anybody. But sometimes I think, well, you're just jumping too fast, or you think you know these things. And so here your friends knew they weren't, and here you knew they were. That's tough to know. How do you know these things?
I have zero. Fortunately, I will say that I have zero common DNA with my wife. Tell me she's not my wife. Tell me that she's not meant to be my wife. Tell me that this wasn't a plan beforehand. And tell me, the whole DNA blood thing, to me, it goes out the window. And when people really question it, I go, well, that's okay. That's okay for you. They're not your kids, so you don't have to know. I have had multiple people tell me, well, there's no way you love them the same as you love your biological kids. And my answer is always the same. Do you love all your children the exact same way? Do you love them all for the same reasons, do you connect with them in the same way? I said, I'll tell you what, I would take a bullet for every one of my kids, but you're right. I love them all differently. But what's the scale? I mean, go through your children and tell me on a scale of 1 to 100, I love this one 98.2. I love this one 81. No, we freaking love our children. We love them because they're our children. And you know what? We're God's children. So it's a bigger picture.
I talk with a lot of adoptees, and mostly the adoptees that I talk to they've gone through a tough time and they want to tell their story. The people who I don't talk to would be people like your kids that just are living their lives. So how are these two kids now? I know we're jumping way ahead in the story, but how are they now?
They're freaking awesome. So our David, who is now in his 30s, he had a lot of developmental delays and is challenged in a lot of ways. Growing up with David was very hard. He was in and out of the state hospital a few times, had to go to a boys' home for a while, had some real violence issues, had a lot of issues with honesty and a lot of behavioral issues. That being said, David now, we live down in St. George, Utah, and that's recent. We just moved here a year ago, but we moved him down here with us in a group home. And so he lives in a group home about 20 minutes from us. I just talked to him yesterday. We talk all the time. We see him. We have him over, and we are close as can be. I take him to Disneyland every now and again. And then Christa has just turned out to be a delightful, delightful woman. She is about 30 now. I think I'm so bad with ages. She either just turned 30 or she's about to turn 30. But she moved to Pennsylvania and is now engaged and getting married in May to an amazing man. And just about 4 or 5 weeks ago, I flew out there, spent a couple days with them to get to know him, and then I took Christa to Disney World out in Florida, and we spent 3 days together, just the two of us, just hanging out and talking about life. They are awesome kids.
If I were to talk to them, which I would love to do, and I were to say, David, do you want to meet your biological family? What would he say?
So interestingly, they have. The bio parents are not together anymore, and we have stayed somewhat in touch with them. For a little while, we did some visitation and whatnot, and then they kind of, one moved out of state, and then the other moved out of state. They've kind of kept in touch with us. But interestingly, the birth mom wanted to see them, and they were coming through town and visiting, and I said, I'll ask, and it's totally up to them. It's not my call. I'm happy to do it, and okay if they say no. And it was funny because David doesn't process enough to really care a ton, and Christa kind of just said, well, I guess I could. It's whatever. So I kind of nudged just a little bit and said, if you're not uncomfortable with it, it'd be kind. And, they have a full brother that they had never met who was younger. And so we went and had dinner with them and with their grandma, and they met and whatnot. And afterward, birth mom kind of said, well, maybe we can kind of start a relationship. And David doesn't really have that capacity. But when I talked to Christa, she kind of just shrugged. There was not a lot of emotion. And she just said, I was one. You're my parents. They're nice people. And we didn't shut it off, but they don't communicate anymore. So that was a one and done. They don't think of themselves as adopted. We don't think of them as adopted, but we also don't shy away from it at all. We just, so that's it. Yeah.
In all honesty, David was a hard child.
David was a hard child. David was a very hard child his whole life and continues to have a lot of challenges. Behaviorally, he's been diagnosed with a lot of different things and really has had a lot of struggles. And we've had to have the police at our house many times for David, but he's not the only one. And so, yeah, it was hard as heck. I think that them being the first two, I think going back, I think we get prompted sometimes to ask the right question. When we pray, I think that's why I had to ask, are these our children? Once again, are they ours? Because if it's just, hey, I could take care of them, that's a whole different issue when the times get tough, when we have to go bail them out of jail, or when, one of the other kids is crying because they've been beaten up, or when, we find out the carpet's on fire or whatever, whatever it is, there's a difference between, yes, you can take care of these kids and these are yours. And it gave us some perspective for the eternities.
Because of that, I don't want to say ownership, but that stewardship,
that's a good word
that
for it.
Totally responsibility is what gets you through those immensely hard times.
Yeah, I once heard that the difference when you're having breakfast, that the egg is involved, or no, sorry, when you're having bacon and eggs, the egg is involved, but the pig is truly vested. And I think that that's kind of the difference, between taking care of kids and adopted kids being your own. You're all in. You're fully vested. And so David was ours. There wasn't, and I know families, and I would never put it down. It just wasn't our experience. I know families where they've tried and they've had to send kids back, and I can't imagine that kind of pain. That wasn't our experience, but it was hard as heck. I also, for people considering adopting from the state, I don't know what it's like now. It's been a long time. But we were told a lot of things. Oh, you'll have so much support. You're going to have all this support, and we know, and we're there. And then, it's kind of the car dealership. You drive off the lot, and then you show up the next day, and they go, wait, who are you again? And, that's okay, because it didn't change who they were. But at this point, the parents were still fighting, saying, it's great that you're foster parents, but you'll never adopt them. Now, here's the interesting point. Right before I started doing consumer electronics, to make ends meet while I was doing comedy and stuff, I had a regular selling job. It was like literally selling frozen steaks door to door with a buddy of mine. And so we were doing that just to pay our bills. And we ended up working with this couple who was constantly complaining about how bad their life was and how they lost their kids and all these things. And it turns out that was David and Christa's parents that I was working with before I even knew who David and Christa were. But every day I would hear them talking about this. The odds of all this happening are crazy. So the first time...
So were you selling them meat? Or
No. They were working at that
too.
company. No, they were there too. And so anyway, so we were kind of coworkers before I knew who they were. And then, of course, my wife had met them several times because she was the therapist. They'd come into the school and she'd be there. So then the first meeting we had, we're sitting there with David and Christa, and in comes walking the parents, and there's they had already left the company, and then so had I. But there's their former coworker and their kid's therapist, and they're looking around like, what's going on? And I'm going, yeah, we're married and we're the foster parents. So they said, sorry, we will never, ever let you adopt them. We will fight this until the very end. So fast forward several months or a few months anyway, and I'm well into my consumer electronics career and everything else. We've got the kids, and all of a sudden my wife calls and says, hey, they are willing to sign the documents today. Get to the courthouse now. But we didn't know why. So we show up, birth mom is bawling. Birth dad was pretty detached, nice guy, very detached, but she was crying, and she said, I can just see that we're not going to be able to win this. But she said, I want 3 people to take the stand. My sister, my mom, and my best friend. I want them all to stand up and testify that I love my kids. I need it on court record so that someday they can read that I love my kids. And if my mom, my sister, and my best friend won't testify, I will not sign the documents.
How old were the kids by then?
One and a half. This is months later.
It was just
1.5
months
and
later.
2.5.
Okay.
Yeah. And so anyway, we're waiting on the best friend, and all of a sudden there's all this hubbub. No one can find the best friend. It's just the mom and the sister and all of the social workers and all the state people are begging her, look, you'll have 2 people. She had it locked in her mind. It has to be 3. And I walked over to her and I said, hey, how many days did I sit and listen to you talk about how much you love your children? How about I be the 3rd? I'll testify how much you love your kids. And she said, okay, I just wanted 3, and you definitely know how much I love them. And so mom got up and, yeah, she loved them. Sister, yeah. And then I got up there, oh, she loves her kids. and I was a disaster. I was such a mess. I don't ever want the kids to see the transcript because it'll say sobbing inaudibly because I'm a sucker for that kind of stuff. But I testified, and the gavel came down. They were ours. We were sealed to them. And we thought our adoption journey was over. You know, we had our hands full with David and Christa. My wife quit her job. Like I said, I started working selling consumer electronics, which has been a beautiful career for me. But my wife got pregnant. We had our son Miles. Miles, who it was his birthday just day before yesterday. He lives up in the Pacific Northwest now. But we had Miles. We bought a larger home, which was really nice, and moved into a much better place. And for a while, it was just us. And then we had our bio son, Keaton. And David was having so many problems emotionally and physically that he had gone up to the state hospital, and they had taken him in, and he was living there. And we were going up 3 or 4 times a week to visit him while they were working on things. And one Sunday I went to church with him up there. They have a chapel, and a man was speaking about our responsibility to take care of people and whatnot. And all of a sudden the Spirit said in a voice, "You will adopt a teenage daughter." And I mean, I heard it like I hear you right now, Donna. I mean, this was a voice that just said, "You will adopt a teenage daughter." And I had told my wife, we will never adopt again. Things were so hard with David. We had our 4 kids. I don't want more. And I'm driving home going, how am I going to tell this woman that we need to adopt a teenage daughter? I mean, this was never on the radar. And so we went home and I said, hey, we need to talk. I don't know how to explain this, but I think we need to adopt a teenage daughter. And my wife said, I know, I've already been looking. To which I said, I know, I've already been looking. I'm so much better than you.
I'm behind again. So
I was there first again. So, but this one was so direct, and it was, and Donna, we are not like the silly, super spiritually breathy people. My wife and I are cynical, and we kind of rip on people, and we make fun of things, and we sit in the back row at church. But I promise you, that's what the Spirit said. And then even crazier, we were like, well, we told the state we're open to a teenage daughter. And they'd say, okay, we've got a girl and her name is, Catherine. And okay, let's go look at the file. And it doesn't feel right. We don't want to meet these girls to get expectations up. And how do you do that? And there were probably 8 or 9 girls in a row that we looked at, and I was traveling quite a bit for business at that point. And my wife called me one night while I was on the road, and she said, hey, they have another girl for us to look at. And I said, okay. And my wife said, her name is Portia. And I said, that's her. And my wife said, I know. I knew. I didn't even have to meet her. I knew that was our daughter. That was it. And Portia had been through far worse than anyone I had ever met at that point. Some of the things she'd been through, and she came over with her social worker, and she had given up on finding a family, and she had her hair down in front of her face and wouldn't make eye contact. And the second I saw her, I just went, that's our daughter. That's our daughter right there. She was 13 and had been in group homes that were really bad. And the things she had been through with parents were really unfair. And she was very damaged. And she was sitting on the couch with her social worker and leaned over to him at some point. He told us that she leaned over and said, I think I want to live here. And so we moved her in. And that was an interesting dynamic, because bringing in an oldest is not always great. We don't always recommend, hey, bring them in older. And she was top of the food chain. And, there were some struggles there. And
how old were the others by that point?
Gosh, you know what? I should have made notes, I'm sure. I wish my wife was sitting right here with us.
Were they less than 10?
Keaton, our youngest, was less than 10 for sure. Let's see. Well, so Portia, I think, is 35 now, and I think Christa's 30 and David's 31. So she had a few years on everyone. And then Miles and Keaton are both younger.
I got to tell you, when you first said that your oldest was 34, and then you said you've been married for 31 years, I was waiting to see how this was, how that happened. I wasn't going to make any assumptions.
That's a fun thing because we were both on our missions. And, people may not know this, but when you adopt a kid, they give you a new birth certificate. And so that's if you decide you don't want to tell the kid that they're adopted, you have a birth certificate. So we have a birth certificate for Portia saying she was born to me and Vanessa while I was in Chile and Vanessa was in Brazil. So she was born while we were on our missions. And yet she was born in I think she was born in Southern California. But anyway, it's quite a story. So, but she was the oldest. And it was hard as heck right away. And, these kids, to their credit, when they get to that age, they have only survived by lying. They have been so brutally and miserably hurt by every person they've loved. And so their defenses are up. They are not going to love you. They are not going to. And, the whole axiom of how do you know when they're lying? Well, their lips are moving. And, we studied a lot about attachment disorders and about emotional disorders. And my favorite, and we saw this so much with our kids, was the old test. If you want to perform a test, it's, if they love chicken sandwiches and they love peanut butter and jelly, offer them both and they'll say, I want tuna. And that was Portia to a T. She sabotaged. If we went on a family vacation, she trashed it. When it was dinner time, she wasn't hungry. And when it was time to go to church, she was sick. And when it was, what do you want to do, Mom and Dad? So I know how to be the contrarian and do the opposite. And we had rough years, and then you get to a point where, I feel like every kid that we brought in, at least, there was the honeymoon period of, oh, I can't believe how wonderful this is and how I feel so loved. And, oh, crap, this is going to hurt. Also, if I love these people, what does that say about my parents? I'm betraying them. They're going to get ripped away. Do they love me as much as this other kid? What's happening? I better just sabotage this and destroy it before everyone gets hurt. Then you go through a living nightmare. And then you kind of come out the other end. And now Portia lives up in Idaho. I was just there with her last week. We spent a couple days together and wonderful. Oh, she's so great. But we went through rough years. So once again, and one of my favorite things is that we pray and we tell God what our plans are. And he says, that's adorable. Let me know when you're ready to let me be in charge.
And God laughs.
Yeah, that's what it is. I always like that. I always like thinking of him going, well, that's adorable. Is that what you think is going to happen? Oh, you are so cute. And so we were done yet again. And then my wife called and said that there was a 9-year-old boy that they needed an emergency placement for. His family was probably the roughest background. And when we picked him up, the hyperactivity and just the energy and the all over the place, on top of just the fact that he's 9. And we were worried because he was just barely older than Keaton, our youngest. They're 2 years apart. And so, Keaton was 7, and bringing one in to kind of be an older brother, we were worried about that.
You broke all of the rules, rules. Oh,
we did everything wrong.
Yeah.
We did it all wrong. Donna, we are and you're welcome to not publish this podcast because
don't do anything that these guys did.
I will not be offended if the title of it is How to Do Everything Wrong with Shawn Rapier. That's okay. But we brought JC in, and it's interesting with JC because when my wife said, hey, state called, they've got this boy, I went, we were on to our third house at this point. We bought a massive house and it had 8 bedrooms. And I just looked at her and I said, we have the room. And my wife was still staying home full time. I fortunately was making a good living. And I went into our bedroom and I knelt down and prayed and just said, if this is not your plan, just tell me, just let me know. Otherwise, great. And we got JC and we immediately just fell in love with him. And he he loved his parents so much. And unfortunately, he had some bad advice from other family members who kind of made out the state and us to be the bad guys. That, there was really nothing wrong, but everybody else was kind of out to get them, and so he came in quite angry. And then my wife had this impression that she needed to build a relationship with his parents. And so she invited them out to a picnic and brought her camera and did a picnic. I was out of town, but she did a picnic with him and his mom and dad, and they took photos together and everything else. And then a few weeks later, his mom passed away.
Oh, my.
And, sorry, I had to tell him. And he was sure he was going back to them. That's the hardest part, is now he kept telling us, I'm just going to be here. My parents are getting their act together. And then it was about a year and a half later, his dad passed. And you just can't imagine that kind of pain, And he was so sure that, he was going back to his family. And here he is. By the time he's 12, they're gone, and I can't tell him that the family members that all said, oh, the state's just out to get you. They had opportunities to take him in, and they said no. And so here we are getting all the pain and all the hate and and there was a while that he just hated us. And how do you blame him? We symbolized everything, but we had lots of good times with him too. And, we have jet skis. We'd go out on jet skis all the time. And we just, we took him whenever we were on vacation. He's the most fun vacation kid ever. We did cruises. We did Disney World. We did Disneyland. We went to Hawaii. He's a blast. And then right as the pandemic was happening, he had a lot of legal issues, and stealing was a big part of what he did. We had to put him in a special high school. And then when he was 17, he got caught stealing right as the pandemic was kind of in full swing, and they actually locked him up. And he never lived with us again after that. And then he escaped, ran away, was living in a park in Salt Lake for a little while and working part-time at a hot dog vendor. And he's a resilient kid. And everything has been hard, I think, for him. But finally, after he turned 18, he kind of turned things around and had finished his time. And I saw him 3 weeks ago. He lives about 2.5 hours from us, but I went and had dinner with him 3 or 4 weeks ago. And he's figuring it out, and he's moved back in with some of his old family, and he works as hard as can be. And sometimes, while he has made his life hard, he's kind of my hero too, because I'm like, I probably would have given up by now. And he doesn't give up. He doesn't have quit in him. He just keeps going. And every time I talk to him, he's like, I think that I'm going to get this job, and I think I'm going to get this car, and I think this is going to happen. And so we just cheer for him, and I love that kid so much. And so all this was going on. We were definitely done again, stupidly.
We need to talk about this kid just a little bit more, because...
Yeah.
So when you prayed about him, you didn't get a really strong impression, don't adopt him. It was just, okay, that was sort of the feeling.
Yeah, I didn't ask. It's a sliding scale of my understanding of family. I didn't, with David and Christa, it was, are these my children? I need an answer. I need you to tell me, or I can't take this leap. And then with Portia, I was told, you will find her. And I think we had to know in order to bring a teenage daughter in. We had to know. And then I think with JC, it was like, okay, I understand the process better. I think it's like when I was younger, I would get callings and I'd go, okay, Bishop, I'll always take a call, but I need to go pray about it. I don't remember the last time I prayed about whether or not I should take a calling. Like, I don't need to anymore. I just now accept, it was like, when I was 22, it was like, well, let me go pray for a half hour because they want me to be on the activities committee. And, is this right? Is this thy will? Is this, I didn't understand it well enough.
Do it.
And then a few years ago, I got called into a bishopric and I went, yeah, all right, good.
Whatever, wherever
perfect.
You need me to go.
Then you pray about how to do it because you can recognize what gets put in your way. So I evolved. It was me. And I learned a lot through it. So
this kid, he really he wasn't part of your family, not until his parents died. And so or did you feel like, no, he's part of our family?
He was always a part of our family from the day we got him. We weren't a part of his until after they passed. He was holding on to, and even after he left, he went back to his old last name for a while. He's kind of gone back and forth. And a few of our kids to a certain extent have done this. And it's okay. Like, go explore that, I think you've got to live through these things. You have to work through these things. That's real pain and figure it out. And so he did. But you know what? We're really close now. I mean, literally, I drove down and had dinner. I had 2 weeks off of work and my wife had to work. And so I said, I want to see all of our kids in a short span, and they're all over the country. And I said, if you don't mind, I'm going to go by myself and I'm just going to visit everybody. So I'm very fresh on what's happening with all of our kids. But he was probably the most rebellious, and it was very tricky. And he's figuring out now. He's figuring out life. He shared some things with me at dinner that I was like, dude, I hope you're looking in the mirror and recognizing what you're saying, that this is growth. That, we're super proud of you, that you've really worked hard to get there. So we love that kid so much.
When you said he's the most rebellious, my mind immediately replaced the word rebellious with angry. Would you agree?
He was the angriest. Yeah, that's a good way to put it. He was the angriest and should be. You know what? You should be. You come from all these kids, and I'll tell you, one of the disservices, if you're a non-adoptive family, this is something that we do, that we don't know we're doing, and it comes from a good place. But don't tell an adopted kid how lucky they are.
No, they don't want to hear it. They don't.
And I don't want them to hear it. And you know what? I sit and I hear people will say, to some of our kids, oh, aren't you so lucky? You were in the foster system. This family took you. How about, aren't you so unlucky you were in the foster system? You who's saying it, I get that you have a good heart, but you didn't go through what they went through. Don't tell them they're lucky. You don't, that's not what lucky is. I'm sorry. They went through the refiner's fire that you didn't have to, that I didn't have to. I had a loving family growing up, I don't mean you specifically, Donna, but I mean, but it's a perspective warp. He was the angriest, and he should have been. Of course he was angry. Here he was living his best life, not knowing what was going on with his parents. There were major things going on behind the scenes. All of a sudden he gets ripped away from his happy family. He gets put into this boys' home of total anarchy and chaos. Then he gets shoved into our home while he's going, hey, I'm going to go back to my parents. And he would tell us, I'm going to go back to my parents. And then all of a sudden I had to sit down and tell him, well, your mom has passed. And now a year later, your dad has passed. And he internalizes thinking, did I cause that? Did I make them die? I'm supposed to go live with them. Now his entire world has been completely shattered. Yeah, he's angry. Yeah, he's angry. I'll tell you a beautiful gospel lesson. He was finally arrested. And sometimes we just have to laugh at the craziness.
I have to acknowledge how much I love people like that.
Yeah.
And because, of course, I've been through times when I'm so embarrassed.
Yeah.
And whoever is being harmed, just expresses their kindness and their love. And I love those people. And in time, you get to the point with your own children that you love them regardless.
Yeah.
And what it does is it expands your heart so that out there in the world, regardless of what anyone does, you go, yep, I've been through that before.
That's what it does. And I wouldn't trade it. And our neighbors were so wonderful. And there'd be a cop car out in front.
Sure.
And they'd be taking one of our kids out in handcuffs. And we'd wave. And then a half hour later, we'd get a text. You guys doing okay? Can we do something for you? Or suddenly, cookies would just show up. Or we had amazing neighbors. I mean, we lived in that same house. It's very funny, though. If you were to drive down that street when we lived there, you can name your Wi-Fi for your house. Our Wi-Fi and the name of our home was Dysfunction Junction. That's what we called the house because there was just so much craziness. I'll tell you, for people who don't have adopted children, but maybe have family with adopted children, or we had amazing church leaders who loved our children and accepted them for who they were. They recognized that it wasn't their role, nor was it possible for them to fix our kids. And so instead of fixing our kids, they would just love them. And they were the best. And they would come and tell us, yeah, we did this activity and here's what happened. And here's how I dealt with it. And is there anything we can do better? And they were very open about it. But we had one very sweet teacher with one of our kids who would always tell us how wonderful our kid was. And all it did to us was go, well, what are we doing wrong then? Because they're not wonderful with us. What are they doing in class? Oh, no, they're always so good. They're so sweet. And we were really surprised by this. And then we found out from somebody else that this teacher was telling other people, oh, their kid is a monster and is terrible. And that sort of hurt because it was like, you didn't see them the way you told us. And by the way, we live with them. We know. I appreciate you. But be honest. If you're working with the kids who are adopted, be kind, be loving, and be honest. This is what we see. How can I better deal with it? And for a while with one of our sons, they assigned a specialist in young men's and said, that specialist came over and said, I want you to train me on your son. We want him. We started pulling back on some of the activities going, look, if I can't go with them, they can't go to this one. We can't send them on a camp out. We can't. And so they started assigning people, and it was a real blessing. The ward was amazing.
No, it's amazing. I remember Scouts.
Yeah.
They called me and they said that my son had taken a shovel and smashed it against one. Oh my God, I was so embarrassed. And I went over and we went together to apologize to the boy that he hit the shovel against his leg. And then they just wanted to play Xbox together.
Yeah.
And I thought, and the mom of that boy, she just, okay, it happens.
Yeah. And, we had kids who had stolen from other people, and we had one who had stolen some electronics from someone their age, and we went over very embarrassed, and we took them a replacement, which was very expensive, and cookies or something. And we were like, we're so embarrassed. We're so sorry. Their daughter, who he had stolen from, brought a card over that she had made that said, we forgive you. We love you. It's people trust that people are going to be good.
I think when you say you understand God better and you understand him because of adoption, boy, that's the case. You see things so differently. And your love for him grows because you know that he's tolerating in you the same thing that you're tolerating in other kids. And he loves you just like you love them.
Yep, absolutely. Yeah, you learn about yourself, you learn about God. I will say the flip side of when we have had people have said, well, we thought about it. Good, think about it. God will put a path together for you if it's right. But if it's not you, it's not you, and that's fine. Don't make it you. But if it is you, great. But if you know someone who's adopted, keep an eye on them. Keep an eye on their family if they've adopted. They may need someone to sit at church with them.
Help them out wherever.
Yeah, maybe give them a hand, because there's a lot. And maybe don't adopt 6. Maybe just, but it was never a plan. Donna, we didn't plan on adopting anyone. I wanted 2 kids. My wife wanted 4. That was the big debate. We ended up with 8. We adopted 6. It was great, but it kind of just happened. There was no grand plan. It just happened. But God is good. He loves us and he knows us. That's for sure.
I'd love to do an interview with your wife and see if she tells a different story. I'd love to hear her point of view of this story.
So I hosted a podcast for 4 years called Latter-day Lives, and we had all these guests on, and it was a wonderful experience. And the number one letter I would get is, when are you going to interview your wife? And she will divorce me before she ever gets on air on anything. She is the ultimate behind the scenes. You're good. Yeah. So I host a podcast right now that's super fun called I'm From the 80s. And it's just me and a bunch of other Latter-day Saint guys talking about stuff from the 80s. We do top 10 lists. Super fun. I have begged her to come on because she's from our same generation. Nope. And she knows, nope, there is not a chance. So I do my best to tell her story. She will, if she listens to it, tell me everything I got wrong. I'm sure of that. But and she would be good because she knows the dates and the timelines but so we'll put an asterisk that this is to the best of my 53-year-old memory.
Well, the bottom line, give us the bottom line. You've kind of given it, but I'm going to ask you again. What is the bottom line advice that you would give to anybody listening to this podcast that's considering adoption, that was adopted, has adopted? What advice would you give them?
Trust God. And really, he has a plan. Don't give yourself too much credit or too much guilt. Just go with his flow and his plan and figure out what he wants for you and what he wants you to learn. I'll maybe close it up with an experience I had once. We pray for our children, and one of my children was going through a really rough time. And funny enough, it was one of my biological kids. And I was in Miami, and I remember just being torn up about the decisions he was making and what direction. He wasn't doing anything wrong. He was lost, and I felt like we were losing him. And I got down on my knees and I wrestled with the Lord, and what are we going to do? And what's he going to do? And and mind you, again, this was a bio kid. And I just wrestled, and what are we going to do? And finally things broke, and the Spirit came through, and God said, what are you doing? Get up off your knees. What is wrong with you? I'm God. He's my son. Did you forget who I am? How about we'll make a deal? You be his dad and I'll be God. And you trust in me a little bit that I know what we're going to do here. Stop groveling. Like, what are you doing? You don't own this. And ever since that experience, whenever we come across scripture that says, I am God, he is. And so forget about all the crazy, are they adopted? Are they bio? Are they foster? Are they should we, shouldn't we? I am God is really important because he already knows. And that's what I think I learned about going from walking in the rain and dramatically praying my eyes out about, are these really my kids? To, yeah, we have room. If it's not your plan, just tell me and that acceptance, because he's better at it than you are, and he's better at it than I am, and he already knows. And how silly I must have been walking in that rain and praying with God going, it's already happened. You're welcome to keep, it's like us with our kids. You're welcome to keep fighting with me, but I'm Dad. He is God. And if we'll just let go and go with it, but my gosh, does he love his kids. And that includes adoptive parents. Gosh, he doesn't just love the kids. He loves the parents so much. And in those crazy moments when you're sitting in the Disney World jail, or when you're picking up a kid from jail, or when you're getting a call from a neighbor that, something's been stolen, or just when you have to sit and hold a kid who's sobbing because he doesn't understand why he or she is in so much pain. My gosh, God is right there, and he just loves them so much, and he loves us so much. And I'll say this also. Someday I know in the next life that I will fall down at the feet of my adopted children and ask for their forgiveness, because we don't know what they've been through. And I think if we did, we probably would have done things a little differently. But we did the best we could do. And if you're current adopted parent, I know that pain of going to bed at night thinking I'm the worst parent on earth and I'm the worst person. Give yourself some grace. Give yourself some space. You're not dealing with normal anything, and that's okay. Do the best you can. Get up the next day and love those kids and just do the best you can. And eventually they turn 18 eventually.
But then sometimes they don't leave even then.
No, we've had several who have that's why we downsized. So there was no more. No, that's terrible. But gosh, I love it. And I sure love our church, and I sure love our God, and I sure love all of these amazing kids. And my life is just better for it.
Thank you so much. And thanks to all of you who are listening to Eternal Family Adoptions, because that's what it's all about.
Donna, you're a good host.
Thank you so much for this. This was great. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Appreciate it.
Bye. Thank you for joining this episode of Eternal Family Adoptions. I'm Donna Pope. Every child deserves not just a home, but a forever family rooted in love and faith. So visit our website, eternalfamilyadoptions.com, to access faith-based adoption resources and sign up for a newsletter. And join us next time as we continue this journey together.